Sure, for you.
Aaron?
So she went back to the meeting.
January 21st, 2019 council meeting called to order. Everybody stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton,
Here.
Mayor Zelinski,
Here.
Councilmember Schmansky,
Here.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Here.
Councilmember Pontiac,
Here.
City Manager,
Here.
City Attorney,
Here.
Thank you. Citizens' comments on agenda-related items. Are there any citizens who would like to comment on agenda-related items?
Yes.
Please limit your comments to 5 minutes, and please state your name and address.
Good evening, council. My name is Mike Herbert. I live at 306 Hancock Street. Again, as last week, I'm here to encourage city council not to opt out of the recreational marijuana law. I don't understand the need to delay. Even without knowing what the final state regulations are, you could proceed with the preliminary work of ordinance updating. You could proceed with the preliminary work on defining provisioning centers. You could proceed with the preliminary work of amending use table and zoning maps. You could proceed with the preliminary work of creating applications, looking at acceptable locations, licensing, buffer zones, local regulations, and so forth. By not doing so, you are liable to cause further delay. Now, since I wrote this, I have been assured that the city is not just sitting on its thumbs and waiting for the state regs to come through before you do any of the preliminary work. I am appreciative of that, as I am sure others are also. But we are here again tonight because those guiding city council recommend extending the sunset clause of the opt-out ordinance from the initially proposed April 1st, 2019 to now July 1st, 2019, causing further delay. Why opt out? Is the state going to force you to allow cannabis facilities, if you don't act immediately, to opt out? As Mayor Pro Tem Linda Beaton alluded to at the January 15th meeting, after all these years, the city still has nothing in place for medical marijuana provisioning centers. Why is that? Is it because you don't agree with the law? Or is it just easier to delay in the hope of not having to deal with it? It is my opinion that these procedures for delay are unnecessary and countermand the will of the people. Please move forward with the preliminary work without opting out and without further delay. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to talk about gender-related items?
Hello, my name is Theodore Doty. I live at 112 Ford Street in the city of Manistee on the north side, and I live right across from the proposed apartment complex they're going to build on the old Washington school property. I just had a few questions. When they tried to, a developer came in before and tried to develop it, all the people in the neighborhood were sent a letter that this was going to go on. Are letters going to be sent out on this, or is this just open to the public, or how does this work?
It's going to be part of the planning process, and for the development, there has to be a public hearing, but it'll be through the planning commission.
Okay, so it would be at the planning meeting?
Commission
that
level,
you
yeah.
could speak at the planning
Yes,
meeting?
yes,
then?
you can, yeah.
Okay, because as far as I knew, the last I knew it was zoned residential, and now I'm reading that you're trying to get payment in lieu of taxes. So does the payment in lieu of taxes, you try to get that before you change the zoning? Is that the idea, or?
This is at the request of the developer because he wanted to make sure that he had the pilot ordinance, that the council would agree to a pilot ordinance before he spent an inordinate amount of money going forward.
Which makes sense, and I understand that, but what would happen if you got all the approval and went through this, and then it was rejected and they didn't get the zoning changed? That's all I'm asking.
That's a risk he takes.
Okay. The other question was, when the other developer was gonna develop it, he wanted X amount of units, and the council had actually cut it down. I don't know if anybody was on the council at that time, but I believe he wanted 50 or 60 units. He was gonna build condos. And they cut it down to 32 units, and at that point, he backed out of it and said it wasn't feasible for him to do the project. So I don't know if that makes a difference, the number of units. When I went to council meetings before, they talked about, because when we got the letter that they wanted to talk about, the main things were the signage and the lighting that they wanted in this project. That's all I know. The other question I had was, the developer's gonna use that, okay, and you will send out letters, okay. Century Terrace and the public, housing, the city of Manistee. The city of Manistee actually owns Century Terrace, is that the idea?
That's through the Housing Commission, Manistee Housing Commission.
But does the city actually own it, or the commission actually owns
The
it?
commission owns it.
The commission owns it,
Right.
but it is publicly owned. It's not a private,
That is true, subject to some liens that the federal government has relating to the money it supplies.
must be through HUD or
HUD,
something?
yes.
Okay, so my question is, going back to the payment in lieu of taxes, a lot of places had, I know over the last few years, there's been quite a few developers addressed, council tried to get payment in lieu of taxes, and it was always rejected. What is the difference on this project, and why did everybody change their mind and all of a sudden want payment in lieu of taxes? Was there different, anybody on council at the time? The Olson, I'm thinking of the Olson property, wasn't that payment in lieu of taxes?
That was,
And that was rejected?
No, it was not. Council
was
actually, council actually approved a 10% pilot on that program.
And
That,
they-
we did that.
And why did it not go through then? Why didn't they build the project?
Third
did-
Coast did not get their tax, did not get their,
Light-Tech
their
tax credit.
tax credits. And there just seemed to be a falling out with the senior center. They just decided not to do it. It just didn't work for them financially. But the council did approve.
Okay,
I even asked the question, there was a couple options, and I asked the question, no matter what option I pick, are you going to do this project? And the answer was yes, and I asked that 3 times, and it is on tape. We did approve that project.
okay. Okay, I just wondered why, I thought the council had rejected it or something had happened there. So it was actually the developer that backed out of that too, then?
Developer in the senior center, I guess, decided not to go forward. That's all. I don't know the inside detail. I couldn't attend the meetings. They weren't public, so.
Okay, now, whenever there's a project, and I just realized this the other day when I saw it in the paper, but apparently it's been going on a while, the developer has got a name for it and everything, Hillcrest or whatever they're calling it. So you hear a lot of rumors when something like this happens. So the rumor that I heard is the city, must be the housing commission, they're gonna rehab Century Terrace or something, a lot of the apartments, and I know for a fact it's been in the paper up on Vine Street Hill and that, where all those houses in there, I think they wanna rip those down and rebuild new ones. So my question is, are the people from there going to go into this apartment that they're gonna build, or what is gonna happen?
The Century Terrace project is gonna be a big project, and it's gonna last up to 10 years. They're gonna tear down all their buildings. With the last meeting I attended there, they have to supply housing for those people on a temporary basis. They have to move them, and when the building is completed or refurbished, they have to bring them back in, all at government expense.
But that's what I'm asking about the temporary housing. Are they
No.
temporarily gonna be housed in this new project?
It's not what
Because
this,
that's the rumor you hear.
yeah, that's not what this project is for.
Okay, and it's called the workforce development or workforce
Workforce housing.
Housing.
So it's for people that have jobs, that are working, that have low income, that it's based on your income, correct?
Right, but not even just low income.
It goes up to 100%.
Because they built, according to, I looked it up on the website, because I'm trying to figure out who is this group, but they are the ones that built the one up behind Factory Farm and, or whatever it's called, up Farm and Home. They built those, and then they built the, up off the top of,
Reeds Park Hill.
Reeds Park. So they build nice projects. But our main concern, and this isn't just mine, people in my neighborhood brought it up to me. They're saying that they're gonna rehab Century Terrace and these others, and they're gonna bring all those people there. Which we all know, I live a block and a half away from Century Terrace. And over the years, there's been all kinds of problems in there. So the people in the neighborhood, and when you send out your letters and have a meeting, I'm sure they'll be here and they'll voice their opinions, just so you know what's gonna happen.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay,
Appreciate that.
okay. So, that's all I have then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else? New business. Consideration of ordinance 19-02, chapter 867, recreational marijuana. Initiated Law 1 of 2018 was approved by voters at the November 6, 2018 general election. Unlike medical marijuana facility licensing act, for a city to prohibit marijuana facilities within its boundaries, it must affirmatively opt out of the law. Until council reviews its options regarding recreational marijuana, city staff is recommending that the city adopt an ordinance opting out of the provision of the Michigan Recreational and Taxation of Marijuana Act, with the ordinance containing a sunset provision that provides for the ordinance to cease from and after July 1st, 2019, unless modified by council before that date. The city attorney has prepared ordinance 19-02, chapter 867, recreational marijuana. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. If this ordinance is introduced this evening, it could be adopted at the next regular meeting. At this time, council could take action to introduce ordinance 19-02, chapter 867, recreational marijuana. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Again, I've made my position clear on a couple of occasions that I think that we should just proceed, that opting out just sends a signal that we're not interested in this, this development or the potential for development. And I think that other cities, especially some of the larger cities, are maintaining their opt-in. So they must have some good reasons, and I think that's really about trying to stay ahead of the development of this new opportunity for our city.
And my hesitation then in making the motion is that I probably didn't explain myself as clearly as I would have liked to at our work session that we had earlier in January. But I was really more impressed with the way that Traverse City handled all of this by having 2 ordinances, one to opt out until, with a sunset date, and one to opt in for medical marijuana, which sends the message that, yeah, we are interested, we're just waiting for the laws, for the rules and regulations from Laura for the recreational part of it. And so I was kind of hoping to see an ordinance come forward that we could talk about for medical marijuana.
I would remind council that we do have an ordinance for medical marijuana that allows for the medical marijuana licenses.
I know, but not for the dispensary part of it.
Exactly, and that was never a request of council prior to earlier this year to look at a provisioning center. So when we talked about it in the work session, we said that while staff is working on all the ordinance language that we need for recreational marijuana, we would also, at the same time, be working on an amendment to our medical marijuana ordinance that would allow for provisioning centers.
So, but we don't have it here in front of us yet.
No, we don't.
Well, I don't know how the other council members feel, but that's my hesitation. I do think that we need that. I think it's, the voters in the state of Michigan have spoken, the voters in the city of Manistee have spoken. I myself personally voted no, just for the record. And I was hesitant to vote yes for the dispensaries prior to November 6th. But I'm also a member of the boomer generation. I understand totally why so many people would want the recreational marijuana. And I just think we should give the people what they want. And I think, I really like the direction that Traverse City took. I don't understand why we can't take the same direction. They're certainly not scaring off anybody who wants to do development in that area.
Well, just again, to remind council that based on our workshop and the direction we got from council was for staff to work on the languages that we need for the police power ordinance as well as the zoning ordinance for recreational marijuana, and then we'd have to amend our zoning ordinance also to allow for provisioning centers as well as our police powers. So we are working towards that. We don't have it tonight, but we are working towards that.
Are you gonna add dispensaries too?
Yes.
Are you
Well, the
gonna add one?
provisioning centers is what council asked us to bring back.
Okay, but can
For
we
the
add?
medical marijuana, yes, that's what we're working on, to amend the zoning ordinance to allow for those, as well as our police powers to allow for that.
Okay, because you hadn't said dispensaries, so I just wanna be clear that we're doing both
Yep,
at the
and
same time.
Council had, prior to our workshop in January, council had expressed no interest in a medical provisioning center. So that's why we had not done anything. And obviously, council's the thoughts have changed as evidenced in January, so that's why we said we would be working on them. That's why we are looking at the sunset of July 1st for the recreational aspects to make sure we have everything in place. The last thing we want to do is put out our "we're open for business" sign and can't accommodate anybody.
What would happen if we didn't put this ordinance through? Like, what would be the outcome? Would we
We-
still be waiting anyways?
We certainly would, but to me, if we're gonna opt in or stay opt in and not have everything we need to accommodate people that want to get involved in the recreational marijuana industry, that doesn't look good, in my opinion. If somebody comes and says, we want a license to grow recreational marijuana, we have no process to do that. We don't have the mechanism in place to allow for recreational marijuana. We just don't have that structure set up yet. And that's why we suggested this ordinance with a sunset of July 1st, which would give us time to make those accommodations.
Well, see, the problem I think a lot of people are having with this is if we accept this opt-out provision for the recreational marijuana, we've essentially opted out of medical, we've essentially opted out of recreational. And with the way the law is set up, anybody can grow up to 12 plants. And I've got some real concerns about illegal selling of marijuana and us not having any additional tax revenue or allowing a place for people to buy it legally. That tax revenue would be important to us if we needed to divert some of those funds to law enforcement. So I think that's also a good argument.
Just to reiterate, the ordinance that you're contemplating tonight has nothing to do with medical marijuana.
I know that.
Nothing.
But that's also my point, we've done nothing about the medical marijuana part of it for provisioning centers. We could go forward with that.
We are moving in that direction to bring back the amended ordinances that we need to allow for that.
But when?
I think what we're trying to say is you guys aren't moving fast enough.
Part of the issue too, just so I can relate, there's a zoning aspect of it. So even if we had it here today, that we would still not be authorizing provisioning centers under the Medical Marijuana Act, because we still have to go back to zoning. And we have the zoning folks working on recreation, all the public hearings that they have to hold relative to recreational marijuana. And the thought was to have both the provisioning center and amendment relating to medical marijuana and the recreational marijuana done jointly and at the same time.
So zoning is gonna handle both of them at the same time?
That was the thought, so that we didn't have to have 4 public hearings. We still just limiting it to 2 and do them both at the same time.
It seems to me that the only area in the city that we were even talking about was between the 2 railroad tracks,
Correct.
the north end of town.
For the sale of marijuana, whether it's recreational or medical.
So that's it's not a huge area when you think about it. It's only on one side of the street.
Right, but the size of the area doesn't matter. It's still the same process that we have to go through.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to make it clear that we are working on it, because
We are, and that's been staff's position since we got the direction to work on it, is that we're working towards that.
So the way I see this, you have until July 1st, staff has until July 1st to come up with something.
Yep.
I've done quite a bit of research on this the last few days, reading a lot of comments. One of the comments that I read over and over again was that we talk about the marijuana law being overwhelmingly passed. It wasn't overwhelmingly passed. And a lot of people voted for it, according to what I read, voted for it, not because they wanted a provisioning center as much as they wanted it decriminalized. That was a big issue with a lot of people. They didn't feel that it should be a criminal offense to have marijuana. The other noted thing that I found out was that there are 60 communities as the end of December. There were 60 communities that reported the state that have opted out. Traverse City was one of those that did opt out. Majority of the northern counties opted out. But they opted out for the same reason I think we're talking about tonight, a chance to organize and get ready for those new ordinances, those new zoning laws, that type of thing. So I don't know what it would be, what harm it is to give staff an opportunity to set everything up, whether it's medical and recreational, and they have until July 1st to do it and come before us. That seems reasonable to me. Just my comment.
I agree with you.
Any other discussion? Please take the roll.
Councilmember Pontiac?
No.
Councilmember Szymanski?
No.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
I'm gonna trust you guys to get this through, both of them at the same time, so I'm gonna say yes to this.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Next item, consideration of a pilot ordinance 19-03, Hollander Hillcrest Apartment Development. At its January 15th, 2019 meeting, City Council directed the city attorney to draft a pilot ordinance relating to the proposed Hillcrest Apartment Development being proposed by Hollander Development Corporation. The city attorney has prepared pilot ordinance 19-03. The pilot ordinance provides for an annual service fee of 4% of the annual shelter rent. The terms of the pilot ordinance is a 30-year from the enactment of the ordinance. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. If this ordinance is introduced this evening, it could be adopted at the next regular meeting. At this time, council could take action to introduce ordinance 19-03, a pilot ordinance for the Hillcrest Apartment Development. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Schmansky.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of a municipal services agreement. At its January 15th, 2019 meeting, City Council directed the city attorney to draft a municipal services agreement relating to the Hillcrest apartment development being proposed by Hollander Development Corporation. The municipal service agreement would be a supplement to the pilot ordinance as proposed. The city attorney has prepared the municipal service agreement. The municipal service agreement provides for a payment to the city by the developer of $200 per year per apartment. The minimum amount paid under the municipal service agreement is $14,048.09, less the amount paid to the city under the pilot, estimated at $4,048.09 for the first year. The payment increases by 3% each year. The term of the municipal service agreement is 30 years from the adoption of the pilot ordinance. At this time, council could take action to approve the municipal services agreement as authorized and directed the mayor and city clerk to execute the same. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Mayor, could I address one matter? When the agenda was prepared, we were still working through the agreements, and they were being submitted by Mr. Hollander's attorney to MISHDA. The final agreement that was approved, what we had done before was the municipal service agreement, and that $14,000 number that you mentioned was a combination of the $10,000 minimum payment under the municipal service agreement and the amount that the city was to receive the minimum amount under the pilot ordinance. That was modified, and so the pilot ordinance now that was before council and was approved has a minimum amount under that the developer is going to be required to pay for taxes. And so we did not have to include any part of that within the municipal services agreement. So the agreement that council has before it, the modified one that we just had today, the amount actually is $10,000. The numbers work out the same between the two agreements. It's just that the municipal services agreement is a standalone now agreement with $10,000 being the minimum amount that the agreement starts at. It again increases each year by 3%.
How do we handle this now?
Well, the agreement that you have before you, if you're approving the agreement, it's the agreement that's been drafted and council has now. And I think still the motion to approve the municipal service agreement, that motion is fine. I just wanted to make sure that council understood that that number that was in the agenda is not the number that actually ended up in the agreement as it was changed prior to.
Instead of 14, it's
meeting.
gonna be 10?
$10,000. Again, that number, that 14 number, was a combination between the pilot and the municipal service agreement. Now, again, it's going to be just a standalone agreement. So the numbers ultimately between the two agreements work out the same. It's just that this is the number for the MSA.
Okay. Any discussion?
George, on your minutes for the council, it says $30,000, but it doesn't say that in the service agreement. Is that necessary?
The 30 years, you mean?
The 30 years?
If you look in the agreement, though, it says that it's tied to the pilot ordinance, and it will terminate at the same time the pilot ordinance terminates. And so it incorporates that 30-year period. I can find the particular provision if you'd like.
9.
Also, paragraph 7 in the MSA, the term of this agreement shall be conterminous with the period of eligibility for the benefits of the owner under the ordinance. There may be one other section as well, but the two agreements are tied together, and so without saying the 30-year, just by saying that it runs together with the pilot, it is a 30-year agreement. And I should say that It's the lesser of 30 years or the duration of the mortgage loan that is taken out to finance the construction, which we expect that mortgage loan to be a 30-year loan, but it could be less.
Also, I understand that if the Hollander would sell this project down the road, that continues on with the new owners?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect there to be a sale of the project just because there's a loan being taken out by a particular entity, and that entity, which is a limited partnership, the motivation in part for the developer is they sell these limited partnership tax credits, and so that partnership, I think, to dissolve and sell to some other entity is probably pretty unlikely. But the answer to the question is yes, if there was a sale of the complete project, it would still be bound by these same terms of this agreement.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, just a couple of comments. I did, I was very interested in what was happening in Ludington, because they've done at least three of these projects down at Ludington. And I think actually the terms of the Hollander agreement are much more favorable than they are for Ludington, because I think on two of their buildings, they had a 48-year term and 2% pilot, and a lesser municipal services fee per building. So I think we did okay with this.
And the other comment I would make also is that we're gonna have 50 units that are gonna have sewer and water, so that's also gonna help our city water department considerably, because, again, 50 new customers is gonna be a boon, since it's almost all fixed costs.
Exactly, and plus that doesn't include the tap-in fee, the initial tap-in fee. So, yeah, it's gonna benefit our enterprise fund as well as our general fund.
Any other comments? Any other discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Concerns and comments. Citizens, this is time for an opportunity for citizens to comment on municipal services, activities, or areas of city involvement. Citizens in attendance shall be recognized by the mayor for comments, limited to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read. Is there anyone who would like to comment on concerns?
Good evening, council. Mark Whitliff, 363 10th. As you know, I'm the chair of the planning commission, and we recently had our vice chair, Maureen Berry, resign for interests. And I'm asking council tonight for a proclamation for her 14 years of service to the city. So if you could do that, please.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Taylor? Can you do that?
Duly noted.
Thank you. Any other comments? Concerns?
Hi, everyone. Mark Fetter, 251 10th Street. I'm the executive director of the Manistee County Historical Museum. I think, did everyone get schedules and invitations and so on and so forth? Okay, great. As you know from reading that, this year it marks the 150th anniversary of Manistee being incorporated as a city. And I just wanted to come before you this evening just to formally just kind of present it to you and just kind of tell you just a little bit about what we're doing. You can all see on the schedule that I gave to you everything that's lined up, but I just also kind of wanted to know if you had any questions. Kind of the main thing, the reason why we're doing this way, we're doing just kind of small events scattered throughout the entire year, because we just want to do something that was one big event at one venue, and it's $500 for a ticket, and not everybody can come. We wanted to do something a little more fun, and so that's kind of what we're doing. So we're going to kind of place emphasis on the things that don't normally get a lot of attention. Our first event is the kickoff at the Elks Club, and that's going to revolve primarily around service clubs and service organizations, because over 150 years, they've done a lot for the community, and we just think the museum just thinks that's a very important aspect. We're also going to be doing different walking tours throughout the city that's going to include River Street and a lot of those buildings that are just kind of plain looking. There's a story behind those buildings. Let's not ignore it. Let's kind of find out about, let people find out about the neat history behind those buildings. We're also going to be doing walking tours of the residential areas kind of west of Maple Street, and particularly on a lot of the homes that aren't standing anymore, or there's a big empty space. Well, there used to be houses there, and we're going to talk about those houses. And then we're also going to do fun stuff like a trolley tour through Maxwell Town. It's a really cool part of town that doesn't get a lot of attention, but there's a lot of neat historic buildings there. We're also going to be working with the local, or Manistee High School, to do a play in November on one of Manistee's unsolved mysteries that happened in 1869. And we're going to be doing a program about the parks and a bunch of other cool things. So I just want, like I said, I just want to come and kind of formally come before you and just kind of announce that. With all this said, does anybody have any questions or comments?
Mr. Finner, I think what you're doing is great. I really appreciate the fact that you've
Thank you.
encouraged all the private organizations to get involved.
Sure.
But one thing, I do have a suggestion.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
For the museum.
Yeah.
Is to sponsor a official T-shirt contest for the 150th anniversary of Manistee.
Good idea.
And again, and then have basically, kind of patent that idea so all the proceeds goes to the museum. I think that might even be able to get some donations to get you kicked off.
That's a neat idea.
Right.
It's a neat idea. I'll run that by the higher ups at the museum. But no, thank you for thank you. That's a very neat idea.
Because I know I'd buy a 150-year anniversary T-shirt.
Thank you. That's a very neat idea. I'll certainly look into that. Absolutely.
I've got to echo Mick's comments. I'm really glad that you're doing this and including the youth. It's
Sure.
Good job.
Thank you. We're all looking forward to Roger's address too at the.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure I'm speaking for council. You're much appreciated. You do your due diligence. You do a very good job. I'm sure you're going to put together a really good program, and it's going to be well received. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Anyone else? Seeing none? Officials, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, just wanted to let council know that DPW maybe 10 days ago sent out run water notices to those customers that have a historical tendency to freeze. So those are out. They are monitoring the frost levels. As of Friday, they had less than 6 inches of frost in the ground. Over the weekend, they had a couple of frozen pipe calls. All of those were related to either a broken window in the basement or a door left open. It wasn't necessarily because of frost in the ground. So they are monitoring that on a regular basis, and if the need presents itself, we'll do more in terms of working with the community on run water.
And there is an adjustment, correct, to the homeowners?
Yes,
If they have to run water
Yep.
for that, there is a.
Yep.
Yep, I'm proof of that. I got my letter, so.
That's all I had.
Mr. Saylor?
Nothing, Your Honor, thank you.
I don't know if there's anybody else here.
No.
I don't see anybody. We'll start with,
I've got nothing.
Well, I ran my water because I'm on a high hill and that wind just blows like hell through there. So I run my water. That's good.
Councilman Samansky.
No, sir.
Mr. Cooper.
No, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Nothing, just everybody have safe travels over the next 24 hours, I guess. Supposed to see some significant snow for its change, so.
Cross your school's not gonna be canceled.
I'd like to thank everybody who stepped to the podium and spoke their mind tonight. It's much appreciated. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion.